Candela's story. No one is born fully formed. It is through self-experience in the world that we become what we are. Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. 2 weeks after school ended for summer, I had told a group of much younger teachers, "The students I teach have saved me much more than I ever saved any of them." The next evening, the phone rang late, muffled crying. Then, "Lavin, I don't know what to do. My mom is threatening to kill me and then to commit suicide. What should I do?" It was Candela. She was overwhelmed. I told her to call her older sister and to ask her to meet us at Burger King. James Baldwin's views of teaching and James Joyce's deep encounter with language play both pertain to Candela's tale of fear and trembling. First, Baldwin. The purpose of education, finally, is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself, to make his own decisions. Baldwin delivered this claim in his talk given in a New York City library to a group of majority white educators in October of 1963. He roots his discourse within the mind and heart of the student, particularly the African American student, wishing teachers to know the student's psyche as her or their or his or the child's internal struggle. Therefore, Baldwin poses the questions as if within an imaginary stream of consciousness resonating within the student's mind. He postulates further. The student will say to himself, "This is black and this is white," will decide for himself whether there is a God in heaven or not, will ask questions of the universe, and then, with those questions, he will live. This is the way he achieves his identity. James Baldwin, Talk to Teachers. Baldwin assumed, I decided, that the child's coming to terms with the big questions is a process whose uncertainties demand companions, and that accompanying a child or a young adult who is asking these big existential questions is the teacher's role. Rewind 3 months earlier. The library excursion. Candela had announced to me about 3 months earlier that she would be taking the bus to the Jesuit University on the other side of town after school one day soon. She was 17 that year, and her mother would need to sign the permission letter. Our high school had no library, and Candela's inquisitive mind deserved to behold the spectrums of opinion and critical interpretation, the wealth of authors and schools of thought and journals, and the culture of conserving and caring for books that a great library could provide. She was posing complex questions about our reading. James Joyce's fiction, James Baldwin's essays, Gloria Anzaldua's poems, Frantz Fanon's political writings, and a collection of verse by poet Adrian Rich titled "A Wild Patience Has Taken Me This Far." I wanted her to experience a library as she restlessly interrogated how and what she would write. She was willing to make decisions about what she believed, but she wanted to justify what she thought and felt. Candy was willing to take tests and to score well on them, but she was also testing and grading her teachers and the courses that we taught. She loved to deliberate and longed for the arguments that brought peace and understanding when she was uncertain. Learning with Candela was a thrill for her classmates and for me. So in the cause of the library adventure, I met Candela's mom just the week before Candela's library escapade. I needed her to sign the permission letter. Her mom worked the midnight shift cleaning the elementary school 2 blocks away. So I met Mrs. Cartagena coming off the job at 7:30. La Señora appeared a small, fiercely determined Cuban woman. As we talked, she confided in me that she was losing touch with Candela. She explained that working night and day at 3 different jobs had isolated her from her daughter. She cried. She was exhausted. We sat together in silence as her tears allayed and then dried. I felt she needed to say so much, to vent her struggle, her hopes for Candela, as well as her own sadness. Then she brightened and said she believed the library would broaden her daughter's horizons. She signed the letter. Because I had taught for decades as an adjunct professor in the Jesuits' English department on Hawk Hill, which is the term for the Catholic University's tower, looming almost ivory at the edge of West Philadelphia, I knew lots of librarians there and phoned ahead to set up Candela's visit. The university's library is a weird mix: extensive collection of philosophy and Irish history, and a wonderful offering of contemporary poets from across the panoply of world cultures and languages. It goes deep. The morning after her visit, Candela had more questions than before her trip across town. "So what is Poverty Awareness Week?" she asked, and added, "There were signs around campus advertising a week of awareness devoted to homelessness and hunger." Then I was in heaven with the books, taking them off the shelves, reading, then finding more and more. And she concluded excitedly, "Your friend the librarian showed me a book by Edwidge Dandicat, signed by the author. Imagine that. Dandicat actually must have held it in her hands. I felt like I went around the world. No lie, mister." Finally, Candela paused and wondered aloud, "Hey, if they really want poverty awareness, why don't we just invite them over here?" And she laughed her ironic laugh. The threat. Fast forward 3 months. Burger King. We met about 30 minutes after Candela's tearful, frightened call. The 3 of us. Candela, her older sister Maricela, and me. Maricela had left her home 20 blocks away and her own 3 children with a neighbor. Her husband was working nights. We replayed the tears, their mother's threats, and her delirium. Upon hearing what seemed familiar to her, Maricela said that we must call 911, report the incident and the troubling words kill and suicide, and that their mom would be detained by the police and placed on meds. After about 10 days, she would be released. This had happened before. Maricela would sign the papers. Upset, Candela argued with Mari, saying that would be brutal, heartless, and inhumane. Maricela countered that there was no alternative. Then Candela said that she couldn't bear thinking of her mom confined in that cold clinical environment where no one would understand her. Maricela said that there would be Spanish-speaking nurses and assistants. But Candela dissented. "Translation has to have nuance, Mari. It has to have sensitivity to the words and the meanings that the voices of people produce. It has to be dialogic." Maricela looked perplexed. Candela explained, "Translation isn't a cold calculation. There are endless ways of saying any one thing, and nobody gets Mom's meanings the way that I do. Otherwise, she's going to be a lost message in an absurd scheme." This had been Candela's final essay in our class. I remembered reading her words just the way she was saying them now. Candela told Maricela that she needed to make sure that her mom understood everything that had happened before she broke down and everything that would follow from that point. Then she put her face in her hands and moaned. Anything less would be a violation of the sadness of Mommy's story and the sadness of her whole life. Again, Maricela looked perplexed. A pause ensued. We were all shaking. Suddenly, Maricela pulled Candela to her, hugging her, and repeating over and over, "Candy, I'm so proud of you, baby." Together they decided to call 911 and to be at the house when the police arrived and to explain to their mom what was going on and to accompany her and to do the translation whenever and wherever possible in person, the two of them, for the next couple of weeks. If James Baldwin's point is that education brings teachers into a dynamic relation with the profoundly personal context within which students take risks and grow, his statement of the paradox of education later in his talk to teachers poses another problem that informs my meeting at Burger King with Candela and Maricela. Baldwin puts the tremulous occasion into a larger perspective. He says, "The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he's being educated. The obligation of anyone who thinks of himself as responsible is to examine society and try to change it and to fight it, at no matter what risk. This is the only hope society has. This is the only way society changes." James Baldwin talked to teachers, 1963. So much of what we do as students and teachers and family members and neighbors and co-workers is caught within the paradox that James Baldwin articulates as an admonition to examine and try to change society's forms wherever our perceptions pose poignant questions and uncertainties. Candela and her sister Maricela revealed Baldwin's wisdom to me, as well as an assurance that bringing students literature in all of its complexity is crucial to acquainting them with the predicaments that they face so that they can distinguish what they want to believe and how they want to live. Candela came away with deep convictions about her conversation with books and ideas, as well as her sensitivity to the way meaning is made in the mind and the heart. That's where she felt and honored profound responsibilities to her mother. Isn't that when words are most crucial, when we discern how they create our understanding of our world and thus our relationships? Candela's story became the tale of a young leader in a rapidly changing community. Her full biography will be for another time and another narrative. Our work, however, as students and teachers, is to keep the encounter with history alive and to give what happens in classrooms the integrity we learn from James Baldwin. Feeling the brunt of racism and oppressive systems that he witnessed, when reading James Joyce's novels, Baldwin offered quite a liminal insight that makes sense of the scheme that brought Candela and Maricela and their mother and me into a little community of learning. Indeed, Baldwin respected the past flooding into those moments when we lived together in the crisis of the present. Baldwin's words provide the wisdom that Joyce is right about history being a nightmare, but it may be the nightmare from which no one can awaken. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. James Baldwin, A Stranger in the Village, 1955.